week, and good morning to everyone. I want to thank Pam and Teresa and Casey for getting me here today. And I understand that Jill had suggested Frog Ferry for the program. So thank you, my friend Jill. And I see several friends and colleagues on the call. Hi, John. Thank you for being here. For those of you that have your screens on, can you give me a thumbs up if you've already heard a Frog Ferry presentation? Any of you? Okay, a few of you. Okay, thank you for letting me know that. I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, and the first few slides may be a little bit redundant, but candidly, there's so much to this that I hear from folks that they're like, oh, I'm so glad I watched a second time because it really helped things kind of gel in my mind. And I do think that having a sense for kind of where we've been and where we're going is really important. And I ask you to kind of be thinking about questions. I talk pretty quickly. I'm covering a lot of ground, but I really, really hope we've got an active conversation at the end and really want to make sure that we leave time for that. So thumbs up, Frank, you're seeing my full screen there? Great. So I do start off with this odd slide of myself because people are like, why are you doing this? And why isn't this a public transit agency? And so for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of working with, I've been in transportation and economic development for about 35 years now, which is hard to imagine, but going way back in the day. And that's why I know several of us have had our paths cross. I did spend 10 years with Business Oregon. I was a co-founder of Cycle Oregon and the first executive ride director. And even though that was 34 years ago, it's very reminiscent of this effort. You know, back then we weren't really getting around on our bicycles. You know, if there was a bicycle that we had, it was probably your dad's 10-speed that was sitting out in the garage. So we've really helped change the culture and how we think about cycling here in the community. And that's much what we're trying to do here with our river systems as a meaningful transit mode. I spent 10 years as a director with the Port of Portland. I worked with Pam at Greater Portland, Inc. 5 years with Ericsson, which is a global helicopter operator, really specializing in emergency response, building major infrastructure projects like dams, power lines, fighting big catastrophic wildland fires. And they're also a manufacturer of the really big helicopter known as the S-64 air crane. So that actually gave me a really good experience that transfers well over into the ferry space. And then for, gosh, it's been going on 14 years now, I've been a student pilot here in the area, flying out of Aurora Airport. And that's really the genesis of this, is my flying out of Aurora, up and over the Willamette and the Columbia Rivers and up to Puget Sound in Vancouver, BC, and seeing the waterways up there and the ferry systems. And you just get a really unique perspective of the topography of a region by air when you're flying at about 2,000 or 3,000 feet. And I'm looking at some of the choke points, and particularly for me, it was really the Vancouver to Portland choke point of the bridge. And we are proponents of the I-5 bridge, but just seeing this viable river system there and wondering why we're not using it. So never did I anticipate starting something like this. This just really came out of a need. And as a concerned citizen, I started doing the research, and with every meeting that I had, particularly reaching out to Seattle-based ferry services and working with some senior planners out of the San Francisco Bay Area, learning how this is a best practice. And I believe that we can't not actually implement a ferry system here in the region. So we are transportation enthusiasts. We just believe we need to leverage every opportunity and option that we have. And particularly as we've had this history of really building out roads and rail systems. And yes, we definitely need that. But when you have a natural thoroughfare for river cities, we do know that ferries are considered a best practice. So in terms of where we've been, you know, really it was just born out of curiosity a little over 4 years ago. And I, after making some calls and just, you know, I'd visit friends up in Seattle, and then I'd meet up with the ferry leaders when I was there. I did the same thing down in the Bay Area. and just got equipped with a little bit of knowledge and a number of experts in the field that said, we love Portland, we'd love to help out, you know, we'll volunteer, what can we do? I put together about a 10-page plan, and I took it out to the leaders of ODOT, PBOT, TriMet, and Metro. And they all said, hey, we think this is a great idea. It was actually in the regional transportation plan to conduct a feasibility study with PBOT. And ultimately they said, we don't have the expertise or the capacity to take it on. We think you should, and we'll fall in with you, and we'll make this a public-private partnership. If you look over on the right-hand column, you'll see in orange, there are different studies and reports that those 4 agencies said we needed to conduct. So we had to raise the money for it. We raised, I think it's about $600,000. We've conducted those studies with the help and the input from those public agencies, and basically the results have given us a green light saying, yes, this is feasible, and it is strategic, and it is very time and cost efficient to move this forward. And if you look at the bottom of the right-hand column, you'll see there's an operational feasibility study, and there's also a finance plan. We delivered that last fall, and I'm going to be providing you some highlights of the findings of that. And then you'll see under that where it says done, our goal number 2 for last year and this year is to get a public agency sponsor for FTA, which is Federal Transportation Administration funding. So there's an FTA passenger ferry fund. Oregon does not traditionally tap into that fund. I think it was about 10 years ago when one of the ferries down in the Willamette Valley tapped into that. But this last year was $47.5 million. The notice of funding opportunity, or NOFO, will be out any day. It's looking like that's going to be $120 million, and it's on target to double next year. And with Congressman DeFazio chairing Transportation and Infrastructure, that bodes really well for us. And we have excellent support from our congressional delegation, as well as leaders out of Southwest Washington. And then really goal 3, which was all about the pilot project proof of concept. That was the focus of our press conference that we had about a month ago. And we really feel like we need to get a single vessel out on the water to show this can be done. So just thinking about this in 3 different phases. The phase 1 was a lot of research, a lot of outreach, and putting together our governance. And we are a 501c3. And now we're in the middle of phase 2, which is planning and operating a pilot project. So really over 3 years. I can say to you that we are on time and on target. This is the timeline we set out 3.5 years ago, and we're still tracking. We've known it's been very ambitious, but candidly, again, we just can't not do this given the increases in greenhouse gas emissions and the ever-growing issues around congestion. And then phase 3 onward would be launching, which we call a steady state public ferry. So that would be up to 7 vessels, and we have included 9 different stops for that. And I'll show that to you in just a minute. And across the bottom, you can see that conservatively about $7 million pro bono have been brought to this effort from the private sector. So that's our legal team, to catering, to printing, to pro bono web design. It's really been remarkable, the outpouring of support of really the best and brightest in our community. I can't say enough about what a grassroots effort this has been, and how every single day I hear from people wanting to volunteer and help out. So I'm not going to talk through all of the objectives here, but I just want to be really clear. This is for a public ferry service and not privatized. So it is really unusual for a nonprofit. Our maritime consultant we work with, John Sainsbury out of Seattle, said, you know, I've never really seen this, but he also sees the progress we're making. Typically, it would be a public transit agency that would engage him. And this is for passengers only. So if you've been up to Washington and the Seattle area, there's the big Washington State ferry service. That is with autos. Those are the really big vessels. But if you're down on the waterfront in downtown Seattle, and you hop aboard the King County or Kitsap County ferries, those are both passenger ferries, and that's what we're talking about. And I'll show you a diagram of our proposed ferry. And then looking at different objectives like emergency response. We know in the era of a pandemic that really planning in the event of major catastrophic earthquake is very, very important. There's a very low operational subsidy. We're about 1/7 of the proposed subsidy of an average for TriMet. We need TriMet. We need TriMet's connectivity to and from the docks. We need them to be successful. But public transit is expensive, and I just want to provide that correlation for you of kind of magnitude of scale that early on, 4 years ago, people were like, oh my gosh, a ferry would be way too expensive. And it's like, would it be? You know, how much would it be? Now we've got the numbers to back it up. And ultimately, this is not about putting just a bus on the water. Really, the highest calling of this effort is to foster a greater sense of appreciation for our being in a river city. And from a land use planning perspective, the rivers have been, pretty much viewed as an obstacle, something we need to get around or over. But we have very few points where our general public can come down and interface with the water system. If you think about wanting to go out and dine on the river, most people can't think of two. It's very, very few opportunities, and yet we know we've got this abundant ecosystem that we can benefit from. It's a major green space. It's why we were founded in the confluence of two rivers, and people do protect what they love, and so we do want to get people more informed and aware of this incredible asset that we have running through the middle of downtown Portland. And commuter ferries are a proven worldwide concept. The top 40 river cities in the world all have ferries. And for major river cities in the United States, Portland is one of only 4 that's not leveraging its river for transit. So we are very much on the trailing edge of looking at our river as a transit option. And then we know we've got issues around growing congestion. And then why Frog Ferry? And I have, my office is kind of dark behind me, but I have a lithograph of the original artwork of Frog. When I was with the Port of Portland, and for those of you that have been out to the Port headquarter building, I was on that building's team when it was being developed, and I got to oversee all the art installations out there. And in the commission room, there are large oversized carved doors, and I was able to engage the talents of the chair of the Chinook Nation, Tony Johnson, and Adam McIsaac, who is their resident artist, to do a really amazing installation. And as a thank you, after that project was wrapped up, they gave me the lithograph of Frog. And in the Chinookan mythology, Frog represents good luck and is credited with teaching the local people how to fish by going down to the riverbanks and collecting nettles and weaving them together to create nets. And so as I was here thinking, gosh, I need to come up with a name for this concept, and looked up on my office wall and saw Frog there and reached out to Tony and Adam. And really, for me personally, yes, I want to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles and out on the river. But I think we have a really rich opportunity to educate our residents about our Indigenous past, and thinking beyond 300 years ago to 20,000 years ago, when traveling by the waterways in canoes was the primary mode of getting around. And if you look at 3 o'clock there, you'll see an illustration of what the canoes would have looked like with these animal figures on the bow and the stern. And so we're looking to the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. We've been working with David and Greg, who lead their cultural outreach programs, to really help us and build out educational programs around this, and have names, indigenous names for each one of our stops, and likely to name our vessels. So if you're wondering about Frog, it's just not a playful alliteration. There's actually, you know, meaning behind why we have chosen that name. And this is an animated map of proposed stops. Every single day, people propose new stops to me, and actually we're agnostic as to where the stops are, with the exception of we really need to make sure that on the land side, we've got a good partner on this. There's a saying in the ferry business that he or she who controls the land or the docks is king. And so this is not just about, okay, we're going to put a bus on the water and then we can stop wherever. Obviously, that interface between water and land is really critical in what's called the first and final mile in the transportation business. You know, how do people get to and from the docks and their first and final destinations? So for these stops, we've worked with the public transit agencies, and they really came to us and said, this is where there's the greatest demand, and also where we believe we've got the greatest connectivity to the rest of what we call the transit grid, or where there's the best opportunity for that first and final mile. And just from a transit time perspective, pre-COVID, and what I'm hearing, but I have not validated yet with the TriMet system, that commute from Vancouver to the downtown core has been about an hour and 15 minutes during peak times. Our transit time is 44 minutes. For Cathedral Park to River Place, which is the route for our pilot project, we know that during COVID, there are 300 OHSU employees and staff members that are making the commute Monday through Friday every day. Pre-COVID, it was 500. And we know from the PSU leadership that there are 400 students and faculty coming out of Cathedral Park and St. John's to make the commute to PSU. That commute on transit is over an hour, according to OHSU and PSU. The transit time via the ferry would be 25 minutes. So you still have that transit time to and from the ferry system. The big difference here, and this is born through the research, particularly coming out of the San Francisco ferry service, is the best and highest use of your time as a commuter. So if you're sitting behind a steering wheel and you're making that commute, and yeah, you've got your Waze or your MapQuest and what that travel time is, there's not a whole lot else you can do, and the aggravation and frustration behind it. When you're out on a ferry though, you can tend to your emails, your text messages, you can listen to music, you can go out on the bow and just enjoy the beauty and ambiance of being out on the ferry. And lots of research showing, hey, as an employer, if I've got 2 employees walking through the door, one's just spent the past 75 minutes commuting and driving herself in, and she's already grumpy and kind of worn out, versus someone that's coming off the ferry. Those key employers out of San Francisco are saying, hands down, I want to take that employee that's just coming off the ferry. They've got a smile on their face, they're refreshed, and it's just a great way to start your day. This is an example of a very similar vessel that's currently serving in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has issues around river debris, low bridge clearance. So I just wanted to show people that there are ferries like the ones that we'll have that are currently out in service. Low wake requirements are really important. So when I'm talking to people that live upriver, south of the city, that's really important for them. There's been an amazing kind of greening and a lot of technical advancements in the ferry space, particularly over the past decade, both when it comes to propulsion systems as well as the low wake and ultra low wake design engineering of it. If you look over in the right-hand column here, you'll see ours will be a 70-passenger vessel. For the steady state future operation, we'll have 70-passenger vessels and 100-passenger vessels. So it's really based on demand. upriver, which is kind of counterintuitive, but that's really Oregon City to downtown Portland. That's far more constricted and narrow there, and we'll have smaller vessels there from downtown Portland and further upriver to the confluence of the Willamette and Columbia rivers, and then to Vancouver. Those will be 100 passenger vessels. We plan to operate 6 days a week, Monday through Saturdays, 14 hours a day. Again, for the pilot project, Cathedral Park to South Waterfront. Ticket price, the regular ticket price at $3. This is actually a $2 honored ticket price. I haven't gotten this updated yet on this slide, and then free for kids. So this is the design that we showcased at our press conference last month. We will be going through a formal RFP process. So if and when we receive the FTA money, those are federal public dollars. So yes, we need to go through a formal review, but we did have All American Marine call us about a year ago, and I had met the president of the company 2 or 3 years ago at a ferry conference, and he called me and said, we've had 2 contracts fall through due to COVID. We're in a good position for cash. Would you ever consider having us do a design build lease to sell now, and have you considered a pilot project? And I said, I've got the plan done, it's right here. So he was like, well, we want to go ahead and have you consider signing a lease agreement with us, and then we'll go ahead and design it. And I said, well, I don't have the money in hand, this is a year ago, but would love to continue the conversation. And yeah, I wouldn't start designing anything either if I were in your shoes. And the next day he called us back and said, we are so excited about what you're doing there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to spend the $50,000 and design you a vessel. It's a leap of faith. And so Ron Willey is the president of All American Marine. He was down here for the press conference with the vice president, and they know they'll need to compete for this business, but it's just been a huge leap of faith on their part. They're one of the top 2 ferry builders in the nation out of Bellingham. And when I reached out to our potential insurance provider, and they said, oh my gosh, if you work with All American Marine, you're going to get a really good insurance rate because they're just so darn reputable in the business. Our target audience, really for the pilot project as well as the ongoing, we call the public operation, are really commuters is our bread and butter. And yes, we do want to leverage the hot pass. We really want this to be one-stop shopping and to be partnering with TriMet on that in the future, but that's just that reliable year-round income. So a lot of people say, oh, what about the visitor market? Absolutely. In the summer months, those river cities typically see an uptick of 30 to 50%, if they have the capacity because of the visitor market. So absolutely, that makes sense. For emergency response, we know having assets on the water are really, really important. And if you look at the 9/11 video and the evacuation of 500,000 people from ground zero post 9/11, a lot of that was because of the fishing fleets, commercial vessels, and private vessels. So a lot of people pulled their boats up. What's the problem here in Portland is you really have to have 3 different things for any operation. You need to have the equipment, you need to have the boat, you've got to have the staff, you've got to have someone actually run the boat, you've got to have fuel. We have very few fueling sites in Portland. And so that's part of the issue where you can't just plan on people getting in a boat and helping to move people back and forth between, Portland and Vancouver, for instance. We know based on Columbia River crossing data that there are 135,000 vehicles per day, Monday through Friday, crossing the I-5 bridge. 30,000 of those are making the commute from Vancouver into the downtown Portland core. So just imagine just that north-south trying to get people, back to their homes and their families, let alone east-west and that recovery. And for the market reach, we've got 2.4 million in the region, and we just know that this is a really great opportunity for corporate sponsors, and we'll be starting to reach out to some of those potential corporate partners here in the next month. Supporters and stakeholders, there are many of them. I stopped keeping track at 2,500 meetings. I've probably done a variation of this presentation well over 500 times now at this point over the past 4 years, but extensive outreach, and you'll find about 100 letters of support out on our website. And I really encourage you to take a peek at frogferry.com, and we've got some really cool videos out there that have all been produced pro bono for us by Sockeye Creative and Sparkloft Media. And if any of you as individuals or your organizations would like to provide a letter of support, we'd love to see it. Currently, we have 1,700 supporters and stakeholders on our list, about 200 active volunteers that are really connected and providing meaningful time and value to our effort on any given day, and then 9 volunteer expert teams. So the Maritime Operation Team is led by John Sainsbury, our maritime consultant expert out of Seattle. This is all he does. He's been in the business for 30 years. As a boy, his father was the executive director of the Washington State Ferry System. And then strategy and public affairs, we've got a great team. And candidly, I could probably double that list, but in terms of kind of the tried and true, Nina Bird's name is there in green. She's a board member, and she's really helping us with a lot of the strategy work. Engineering team is led by Kevin Bross, actually out at Intel. Captain Peter Wilcox leads the Decarbonize the Inland Passage project and has been instrumental to our work and really looking at the carbon offsets and doing those computations for us. He's a leader in renewable diesel, and so for this pilot project, we're not going to have the shoreside electric, charging stations in place for the pilot project. It's going to take some time and design engineering. So we'll be putting in a traditional diesel engine, but we're not going to be running diesel fuel through it. It will be called R99, or renewable diesel, which is considered 80% cleaner than traditional diesel. And then the way these vessels are built today is you literally can take out that power block and then drop in the electrified system when that's ready. So we're really looking to 2024 to have the shoreside charging infrastructure underway. Many thanks to our public agency partners. And then you can see the finance team. We have 2 board members on that. Dan Bauer is Executive Director of Portland Streetcar. He is instrumental to our work. I can't thank him enough for his help. And we loosely use the governance structure for Portland Streetcar, where that was founded in 1994 by largely a group of Pearl District developers, working with Earl Blumenauer and a number of public agency leaders to really find a new way to bring people into that development of Northwest Portland. Today, they have a nonprofit board, and they have TriMet as the operator, and then then they have the city of Portland owning the rail cars and the rails. Community Affairs is led by James Paulson, who's the chair of our team. Charlene Seidel is, really great about our business outreach. Marketing communications, we've just hired on Amy Snyder to lead that, and then customer experience is brand new. If any of you are interested in joining a team, let us know. I'm being mindful of time here too, Frank. I'll start wrapping up. Operational feasibility study, just at a very high level. You can feel free to go to our website. All of our studies are located under the research tab on our website. Soup to nuts, if we wanted to put on order 7 vessels and build out docks of the 9 ferry stops, actually all but 2 have existing ferries and some infrastructure, but we're going to need to do probably some enhancements to them, but it makes an enormous difference if you already have infrastructure in place in the water. Our operating cost, $6.8 million. Pretty darn small when it comes to a transportation project. It's $6.8 million for a year for 7 vessels. And then ticket revenue is the 3.0, the annual subsidy, and that's something long-term we would be needing if we want to keep these prices low, which we really do. Obviously, there's ticket revenue, concessions revenue, sponsorship, and I've got a kind of pro forma and a cheat sheet if any of you are interested in taking a look at that. The pilot project, I think I've pretty well covered. And so we'd be looking to begin that in summer, fall of 2022. The FTA has pushed back their grant program. Typically it comes out in January. it's supposed to come out any day now. So you can tell that's been delayed 6 months. And I'm told that's largely due to the transition from the Trump to the Biden administration, and also all the conversations going on about infrastructure. The ferry fund, though, has been pulled out separately from the big infrastructure conversation underway. This just shows you a little bit about electric ferries. Stockholm has a zero emission goal for the Stockholm harbor. We know Governor Inslee is pushing really hard for their blue wave movement up in Seattle to electrify the fleet. And it's just something that is not just being talked about out there in the future, but actually today, where there is a lot of electrification of the global fleet, and really extending that electrical charge through the use and the storage of hydrogen fuel cells. And this is so true. It's just a group of thoughtful, committed citizens. And as I look out at all of your faces, much like your group here today, really being here to change the world and the world for the good. And so I'm grateful to each and every one of you for getting up bright and early to hear presentations like this one. And I welcome any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Susan. Very committed. Obviously, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful presentation, very informative and exciting on many levels. We did a couple questions in the chat room. One is, could we get a copy of your slide deck? Is that possible that we could then distribute it?
Really, Timothy, I would love it if you would email me. It's too large for me just to email, so I need to send it to you through Dropbox. So if you just ping me at susan@frogferry.com, then I can go ahead and send it to you through Dropbox.
Could you send it to Casey or Teresa, and then she could distribute it?
Can. Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Thank you so much. And then we had another question on ridership projections.
So ridership projections for the pilot project, we've got a goal of 1,000 a day. For that one vessel. We're really trying to be very conservative with our projections. You know, candidly, there are a lot of projections that we make for mass transit in this region. I know John Charles is watching in particular, and we really don't want to set goals out there that we're not going to achieve. So 1,000 is ambitious but doable. We're basing our capacity or our anticipated runs based on 50% capacity, which is pretty conservative in the business in general. And then it's about 1 million over the course of a year for the full public ferry service. So I'm happy to break it down for you. I don't keep all of those stats in my brain, but they're meaningful numbers. And when it comes to the number of autos that we'll be removing off the streets, and the difference in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, it's pretty darn meaningful. It's compelling. It's more than you would think.
Yeah, very significant. Yes. Let's see. Timothy wanted to get your contact information. I think Casey or Teresa will send it out as a part of the follow-up from this meeting. Okay. Any other questions for Susan?
Frank, Kate Johnson has a question.
I'm sorry. Okay, Kate. Kate, are you muted or?
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. I just had a quick question about the feasibility study. I know it's way after the fact, but being from the southwestern part of the county, kind of Oregon City, Lake Oswego area, just was curious when it encompassed the stop parts. Is there anything how the impact of some of the stops down there, what the feasibility said about the southern tip of that feasibility study on the commuters on that end?
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of commuters, we're really looking at the max line there. And so Milwaukee Economic Development Leadership has said, gosh, you know, we believe our residents will really want this. We do feel like we're pretty well served for Max. They've got a dock that they bring in during the summer months. And so we might be doing, you know, some trial runs like on a Saturday with a pilot project. Oregon City, and working with the Willamette Falls Project and of course Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Blue Heron Mill Project, this is really integral to their plan and their Riverwalk experience and the mixed use development they'll be putting on the waterfront there. So, you know, it's the second largest falls in volume in North America after Niagara Falls. And you think about Niagara Falls and how do you get there? You know, by and large by boat. And actually it's, I think the Mist of the Sea is the primary vessel. It's electrified that serves Niagara Falls. So yeah, that will be part of their planning effort for that. So that's about as far as we've gotten, Kate. But again, that interface with the land use partners is really, really key. And we're hoping to get back in front of Lake Oswego City Council here pretty soon. We've met with Mayor Buck and council members. I can tell you that Mayor Gambat in Milwaukee is a very strong supporter of ours.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Allison Tivnon is on your board, and she's also on the WA board. So that's a connection there for us. I think we have time for one more question before we move on to the next agenda item. Anybody? Let's see. Raise your hand or put it in the chat room.
And as you're thinking, feel free just to email me, and please think about going out to our website, take a look. That we do have a sign-up form there for our quarterly newsletter. It's just our list. We don't share it with anyone else. I am a Washington County resident, and again, just so appreciate all of your support.